Deep within the vast forests of Oregon, where towering pines stretch toward endless skies and silence settles heavier than fog, there are places meant to watch for fire. High above the treetops, lonely towers stand on ridges and peaks, built to spot smoke before flames could consume the land. But when the fires fade and the watchers leave, something else remains. Wooden stairs creak in the wind. Cabins sway gently even on calm nights. And from inside these forgotten lookout towers, lights sometimes appear where no one should be standing. Locals whisper about voices drifting through the trees, footsteps circling the towers, and figures watching from windows high above the forest floor. Some say the lookouts were never truly abandoned. Others believe the forests claimed them. Tonight, we journey into the heart of Oregon's wilderness to uncover the most haunted forest fire lookouts, places where isolation, tragedy, and the endless trees have created something that refuses to rest. If you were stationed alone in a fire lookout, miles from the nearest road, and heard footsteps climbing the stairs after midnight, would you open the door to see who was there, or would you hide and pray the forest passed you by? Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are safe and comfortable, because the places we are about to explore are far from warmth and company. Oregon's forests are vast, ancient, and unforgiving. For decades, fire lookouts were built on remote peaks to protect these lands, staffed by solitary watchers who spent weeks or months completely alone. They watched smoke rise. They listened to the wind. They lived surrounded by trees that seemed to breathe and shift with the night. Some lookouts witnessed devastating fires. Others saw accidents, sudden storms, and disappearances. A few watchers were never seen again. Today, many of these towers stand abandoned, accessible only by long hikes through dense forest. Visitors report strange sensations the moment they approach. Sudden silence. The feeling of being watched. Voices carried by the wind that speak words no one else hears. Before we climb these stairs together, let me ask you something. If you were alone in a fire lookout deep in the forest, and heard your name whispered from below the tower in the dead of night, would you answer, or would you stay silent and hope whatever was calling you went away? Take a deep breath. And let us step into the most haunted forest fire lookouts in Oregon. Black Ridge Lookout stands on a narrow spine of rock where the land drops away on both sides into miles of untouched forest. From its windows, the view stretches so far that distance loses meaning. Tree after tree fades into haze, a living map of green that seems unchanged by time. The lookout cabin itself is modest, built for function rather than comfort, anchored firmly against wind and weather. The structure was raised decades ago to watch for smoke and fire. Rangers climbed its stairs daily, scanning the horizon with trained patience. Boots wore grooves into the wooden steps. Hands polished the railing smooth. The cabin became a place of routine and vigilance, a quiet post where attention mattered more than conversation. When active patrols ended, the lookout remained. It was preserved as a shelter and observation point for hikers and seasonal staff. By day, it feels open and exposed, bathed in light and wind. By night, it becomes something else entirely. Visitors staying overnight often describe the same experience. As darkness settles over the forest and the stars sharpen above the ridge, the cabin grows quiet in a way that feels deliberate. Wind fades. Insects fall silent. The vast forest below seems to hold its breath. Then the sound begins. Heavy boots climb the stairs. The steps creak one by one, slow and steady, unmistakable in rhythm and weight. The sound starts at the base and moves upward, just as it would if someone were ascending with purpose. Those inside the cabin freeze, listening. They do not rush. They do not hesitate. They climb as though the destination is certain. When the steps reach the top, they stop. Guests wait, expecting the door to open. Second stretch. Eventually, curiosity overcomes fear. Someone reaches for a light and opens the door to the stairwell. The stairs are empty. The ridge beyond lies silent. Yet the air feels disturbed, as if movement has just passed through. On more than one occasion, visitors discover that the cabin door, which they clearly remember closing, now stands slightly open, swinging gently on its hinges. Rangers who service the lookout acknowledge these reports with careful neutrality. They check latches and inspect hinges. They note wind patterns and pressure changes. Official explanations point to shifting temperatures and structural movement. But even experienced staff admit the footsteps are difficult to dismiss. The sound is too precise. Too directional. Historical records provide context, though not clarity. The lookout was staffed continuously for many years. Rangers worked alone for long stretches, climbing the same stairs each day, often in darkness or poor weather. Journals from that time speak of isolation, of listening closely to the forest for changes most people would never notice. Some entries mention the comfort of routine. The climb up the stairs. The pause at the door. The familiar sweep of the horizon. These actions grounded the rangers, anchoring them in purpose. Over time, a quiet belief developed among local crews. They said that once someone learned the forest well enough from that height, they never truly left it. Guests staying the night report other subtle details. Floorboards creak softly as if someone shifts weight nearby. The door sometimes opens a fraction more during the night, though no breeze enters the cabin. In the morning, footprints are never found on the stairs or around the base. The forest below remains unchanged. No lights move among the trees. No sounds rise to match the activity above. Those who hear the boots often describe a strange calm alongside their fear. The footsteps do not feel threatening. They feel purposeful. Like a routine being completed, regardless of who is present. Some visitors attempt to stay awake, waiting to catch the moment the sound begins. They report that the sound starts only when attention drifts, when the mind relaxes into stillness. The moment someone focuses too intently, the sound fades, as if aware of being observed. On nights with clear skies, when the moon lights the ridge and shadows sharpen along the stairs, the sensation of presence grows stronger. Local hikers tell their own stories. They say the lookout is best left quiet at night. That if you hear the boots, you should remain still and let them pass. According to them, checking the stairs only interrupts something that means no harm. No incidents of danger have ever been linked to the lookout. No one has been harmed or chased away. The experiences leave visitors unsettled, but intact, carrying a story rather than a wound. By morning, the cabin returns to normal. Sunlight fills the room. The door hangs closed. The stairs sit empty and worn, leading down into open air. Birds circle the ridge. The forest stretches on, unchanged. Yet those who spent the night rarely forget it. They remember the certainty of the steps. The quiet after. The open door. Black Ridge Lookout continues to stand watch over the forest, just as it always has. Boots climb the stairs. A door waits at the top. And the forest below remains, vast and silent, as though listening too. Whisper Peak Lookout stands at the highest ridge for miles, where the forest thins and the wind gains its voice. The structure itself is simple. A wooden platform reinforced with stone. Railings worn smooth by weather and hands. From here, the land drops away sharply, revealing layers of trees that stretch toward distant valleys. On clear days, the view feels endless. On most days, the air never truly settles. Wind is constant at Whisper Peak. It rises from the slopes below and moves through the trees with purpose, accelerating as it reaches the lookout. Branches sway without rhythm. Needles brush together, creating a low, shifting sound that never fully repeats. Visitors often pause, listening, unsure whether the noise belongs to the mountain or something moving within it. At first, the wind sounds ordinary. A long exhale across stone. A whistle through gaps in the railing. But as minutes pass, patterns emerge. The noise tightens. Breaks. Reforms. Some describe it as cadence, like breath shaped by intention rather than terrain. Then the whispers begin. They are faint, easily dismissed at first. A suggestion of syllables carried on a gust. A sound that resembles speech but lacks clarity. Many assume the mind is searching for meaning where none exists, especially in such an exposed place. Others hear more. They report full sentences forming briefly within the wind, clear enough to recognize structure even if meaning slips away. Words seem to arrive intact, then scatter as the gust changes direction. The experience lasts only seconds, leaving listeners unsure of what they heard. Others hear something more personal. Their names. Spoken softly, never shouted. Never urgent. The sound drifts upward from the trees below, carried on the same wind that moves through the lookout. It feels close, as though someone stands just behind a trunk or rock, out of sight but within reach. The first instinct is to respond. People turn toward the sound, leaning over the railing, searching for the source. Some call back without thinking. Others take a step toward the path leading down the slope, convinced someone needs help. That is when the dread begins. Those who respond describe a sudden shift in atmosphere. The air feels heavier, pressing inward. The wind grows colder, sharper, as if cutting through clothing and skin. The forest below darkens, even in full daylight, and depth becomes difficult to judge. The whisper does not repeat. Instead, silence spreads unevenly, broken only by distant movement that cannot be located. The sense of being watched intensifies, not from the lookout, but from below, from places hidden by branches and shadow. Rangers assigned to the area are familiar with these reports. They warn visitors not to engage with the sounds. Signs advise caution during high winds, citing disorientation and acoustic illusions. Official explanations focus on geography. The slope channels air upward. The trees act as filters, shaping noise into recognizable patterns. The human brain fills in gaps. Rangers emphasize one rule repeatedly. Do not answer voices you cannot see. The history of Whisper Peak adds weight to that advice. Long before the lookout was built, this ridge served as a navigation point for travelers moving through the region. Wind conditions here were known to be unpredictable. Voices carried strangely, echoing far beyond their source. Shouts for help could be heard miles away, distorted by terrain. Some returned shaken, unable to explain why they felt compelled to move toward sounds that offered no clear origin. No large tragedy marks the site. Instead, the mountain gathered moments of hesitation. Times when people paused, unsure whether to trust their senses. The lookout was built to provide clarity and perspective, but the wind refused to cooperate. Those who linger at Whisper Peak often notice another detail. The whispers never occur when the wind is violent. During storms, the sound is chaotic, overwhelming everything else. The voices emerge only during steady conditions, when gusts are strong enough to carry sound but controlled enough to shape it. It feels selective. Visitors who ignore the sounds report fewer effects. The whispers pass around them, unresolved, like half-remembered thoughts. Those who listen closely, who try to understand or respond, feel the mountain close in. The dread is not panic. It is heavier than fear, slower and more deliberate. It is heavier than fear, slower and more deliberate. A certainty that something fundamental has shifted, that a boundary was approached too closely. People describe the urge to leave immediately, not running, but moving with focused urgency. When they do, the sensation fades quickly. Descending the path breaks the pattern. Wind noise sharpens unexpectedly. Brief segments resemble structured speech before dissolving into static. Linguists analyzing the clips disagree on interpretation. Some hear words. Others hear coincidence shaped by expectation. Names, however, do not appear clearly on recordings. That detail remains personal, experienced only by those present. It is as if the mountain chooses its audience carefully, offering recognition rather than repetition. Whisper Peak Lookout remains open to visitors. Hikers stop for views. Photographers wait for shifting light. Most hear nothing unusual beyond wind and trees. A smaller number leave early, unsettled but unable to explain why. Those who hear the whispers rarely forget them. The sound of their own name carried on mountain air stays with them. They remember how natural it felt, how easy it would have been to answer. The wind continues to rise from the forest below, shaping itself around stone and wood. It carries sounds that resemble language, just long enough to be recognized. And at Whisper Peak Lookout, the mountain waits patiently, offering its voices to anyone willing to listen, and testing who is wise enough to remain silent. Dead Pine Lookout stands on a rise of scorched earth where a forest once burned with such intensity that the land itself seems altered. The trees surrounding the cabin are tall but lifeless, their trunks blackened and hollow, their branches frozen in twisted shapes that no longer reach for light. From a distance, the lookout appears sturdy and intact, a square silhouette against an open sky. Up close, it feels isolated in a way that goes beyond geography. The fire that swept through this region happened long ago. Records describe a fast-moving blaze, driven by wind, consuming everything in its path. When it passed, the ground remained dark and brittle, the trees left standing like charcoal markers. Over time, green returned to the lower valleys, but the ridge around the lookout never fully recovered. The burned pines remained, unmoving, as if preserved in the moment the fire left them behind. Even in summer, the air around the lookout feels wrong. Heat rises from the surrounding hills, cicadas hum in distant living forests, yet the space near the cabin remains cold. Not the pleasant cool of elevation, but a persistent chill that settles into clothing and skin. Visitors notice it as soon as they step inside. The temperature drops sharply, as if the walls themselves are holding something back. The cabin was designed for warmth. Thick wooden walls, small windows, a stove placed at the center. Rangers once stayed here for weeks at a time, scanning the horizon for smoke, trusting the lookout as both shelter and tool. Today, the stove lights easily, flames burning bright, but the warmth never spreads evenly. Cold air slips through unseen gaps, pooling in corners, brushing against ankles and wrists. People layer clothing without understanding why. The cold does not fade with time. It remains constant, steady, patient. At night, the sensation deepens. The wind moves through the dead trees with a hollow sound, passing through burned trunks and empty branches. The noise does not rustle leaves. It moans softly, low and distant, like breath moving through a long corridor. Inside the cabin, shadows begin to shift. At first they are subtle. A dark line along a wall that should be sunlit. A moving shape where nothing outside has changed. Visitors glance toward the windows, expecting to see clouds passing or branches swaying. Outside, the light remains clear and still. The shadows continue. They slide slowly across the interior walls, stretching and compressing, following paths that do not match the angles of the windows. Some appear tall and narrow, others wide and uneven. They move with intention, not flickering like reflections, but drifting as though cast by something passing just out of view. Those who watch too closely feel a tightening in the chest. The shadows never take clear shape, but they suggest presence, a sense of something crossing the space without sound or substance. Rangers who once worked the lookout spoke quietly about the phenomenon. They learned not to track the shadows, not to follow them with their eyes. Doing so, they said, made the cabin feel smaller, more enclosed, as though the walls were inching inward. The cold air seems to follow the movement. As a shadow passes, the temperature dips briefly, a sudden brush of chill that fades as the darkness moves on. It feels deliberate, almost coordinated. During the day, the shadows are less active, but they do not disappear entirely. Even under full sunlight, faint dark bands cross the walls at odd angles, too slow to be reflections, too defined to be imagined. Visitors tell themselves the burned trees outside must be blocking the light. But nothing outside moves. The dead pines stand perfectly still, their charred forms unchanged by wind. No branches sway. No leaves flutter. The sun remains unobstructed. The lookout has no recorded incidents tied directly to it. No disappearances. No confirmed accidents. Yet stories circulate among those who have stayed the night. Accounts of waking suddenly, certain someone is standing just behind them. Reports of footsteps that never quite sound like steps, more like weight shifting where weight should not be. Some speak of dreams filled with firelight and smoke, though no scent lingers in the air. Others wake with the feeling of being watched, not by eyes, but by memory itself, as if the land is replaying something it cannot release. The burned trees are often blamed. Locals say the forest remembers what it lost. That the heat stripped something away but left its outline behind. They believe the shadows are not figures, but impressions, cast by absence rather than presence. Scientists offer different explanations. Cold air sinks. Burned ground reflects heat differently. Optical illusions occur in high-contrast environments. Each explanation addresses a piece, but never the whole. What cannot be explained easily is the consistency. Every season, the lookout remains cold. Every year, visitors describe the same shifting darkness, the same uneasy stillness. The cabin does not decay the way abandoned structures usually do. It holds together, firm and watchful, as if maintained by something unseen. Those who leave Dead Pine Lookout often describe relief once they descend the ridge. Warmth returns quickly. Sounds feel normal again. The sense of pressure fades. Looking back, the cabin appears small and ordinary, surrounded by silent trees. Yet memory lingers. People recall the way the cold seemed to breathe. The way shadows moved without cause. The way the cabin felt occupied without being crowded. Dead Pine Lookout remains standing, a solitary structure in a forest that never healed. It watches over land marked by fire, holding on to the chill of an event long past. Even in summer, even under clear skies, the warmth never quite reaches inside. And as sunlight fills the clearing and nothing blocks its path, shadows still move quietly across the walls. And some cold comes not from the air, but from what remains after everything else has burned away. Croa's Watch Lookout rises above the surrounding forest like a narrow spine of steel and timber, built to survey miles of wilderness from a single point. The tower stands exposed to sky and wind, its railings worn smooth by weather and time. As dusk approaches, the first signs appear. Crows begin to gather along the railings, arriving one by one from different directions. They land without sound, spacing themselves evenly as if following an unseen order. They do not call out. They do not move. They simply face inward. Anyone inside the lookout becomes immediately aware of their attention. The birds tilt their heads in unison, eyes fixed on the windows and doorways. Movement inside the tower draws their gaze, but never a sound. Visitors often pause mid-step, unsettled by the quiet intensity of being watched so closely by so many eyes at once. Locals say the crows have always gathered here. Long before the lookout was constructed, the ridge served as a natural observation point for wildlife. Wind currents converge here, carrying scent and sound from below. The tower only sharpened what already existed. The air cools quickly at this elevation, yet the birds do not depart. Wings beating once in a coordinated motion before vanishing into the dark. The silence that follows is immediate and heavy. Night transforms Crow's Watch lookout into a different place. The forest below becomes a dark, shifting mass. The horizon dissolves. Then the wings return. Flapping sounds circle the lookout, close enough to feel, loud enough to recognize. The noise comes from all directions at once, rising and falling in waves. There are none. The flapping grows louder, then softer, then louder again, as if something is circling just out of sight. Those who remain inside feel a strange disorientation. The sound seems to move independently of the wind, sliding around the tower rather than passing through it. At times, it feels as though the wings are inside the structure itself, brushing past beams and glass. The effect is deeply unsettling, not because of fear, but because of the certainty that something is present without being visible. Rangers assigned to night shifts at the lookout report similar experiences. They speak of hearing wings while conducting routine checks, only to find the platform completely empty. Some describe the sensation of air displacement, like something passing close enough to disturb the wind around them. Others feel pressure changes, sudden and localized, as if large bodies are moving nearby. No evidence is ever found. Cameras installed to monitor wildlife record nothing unusual. Audio equipment captures wind and ambient noise, but the distinct flapping heard by human ears never appears in recordings. The phenomenon seems to exist only to those present in the moment. Historical accounts add to the mystery. Early caretakers of the ridge wrote of silent birds watching from the trees, of sudden departures at night that left the air unsettled. One journal entry mentions the feeling of being measured, of standing in a place that observed back. The lookout itself was built to watch for danger, to alert others to approaching threats. In time, it became part of the landscape it surveyed. Some believe the crows recognized this. Crows are known for intelligence and memory. They remember faces. They communicate across distances. They gather where information matters. Crow's Watch lookout offers the highest vantage point for miles. A place of awareness. A place of attention. Perhaps the birds respond to that purpose. Visitors who stay overnight often describe a heightened sense of alertness. Sleep comes lightly. Sounds seem closer. Thoughts feel sharper. Some wake suddenly, convinced they heard movement just outside the door. Others report dreams of flight, of seeing the forest from above, every path and clearing laid out below. As morning approaches, the flapping fades. The first light reveals an empty platform and quiet railings. The wind settles into familiar patterns. At dawn, the crows return. They gather once more along the railings, silent and composed, watching the interior as the light grows stronger. Their presence feels less ominous now, almost routine. They remain until activity increases inside, then depart gradually, leaving the tower alone. Those who descend from Crow's Watch lookout often struggle to describe their experience. They speak of birds, of sound, of an uneasy stillness. Few mention the feeling of being observed, though it lingers long after they leave the ridge. The lookout remains behind, standing tall against the sky, fulfilling its purpose. It watches. And at dusk, when the light fades and the forest grows quiet, the crows return to take their places, eyes fixed inward, waiting for night to rise again. High Silence Lookout stands on a narrow ridge where the land rises sharply and then stops. Approaching the lookout brings an immediate and unsettling change. Sound begins to thin long before the building is reached. Wind that should whistle across the ridge arrives without voice. Clothing shifts without rustle. Even breathing seems quieter, as if absorbed by the open air. Stepping onto the platform confirms what distance only hinted at. Footsteps make no noise. Boots touch the wooden boards, but there is no echo, no dull thud, not even a faint scrape. Movement feels disconnected from sound, as though the ground accepts weight without response. Voices behave the same way. Words spoken aloud fall flat, stripped of projection and resonance. Words spoken aloud feel internal, like talking into soft fabric. Even shouting produces little more than a muted breath, swallowed before it can travel. The silence is not peaceful. It carries pressure. Visitors often notice it first in their ears. A slow tightening builds, similar to altitude change but without ascent or descent. Swallowing does little to relieve it. The sensation lingers, steady and persistent, making awareness of the body sharper and more uncomfortable. The lookout was built for observation, yet the environment resists engagement. Glass windows encircle the structure, offering expansive views of mountains, forests, and sky. During the day, visibility is clear, but the lack of sound alters perception. Distance becomes difficult to judge. Objects appear closer or farther without reliable cues. Inside the lookout, the silence deepens further. The enclosed space should amplify sound, but instead it dampens it completely. Even the softest noises vanish. Hands clapped together produce only the faintest suggestion of impact, felt more than heard. The pressure in the ears intensifies indoors. Some describe a fullness that borders on discomfort. Others report mild disorientation, a sense that balance must be actively maintained. Time seems to stretch, minutes passing without clear markers. It is here that the figures are most often seen. At first, they appear as reflections. Shapes stand just beyond the windows, blurred by light and glass. A human outline, still and upright, positioned where no one should be. When visitors turn fully to look, the shapes do not react. Stepping closer to the glass clarifies nothing. The figures do not sharpen or retreat. They simply exist at the edge of perception, neither approaching nor leaving. Their presence is silent, absolute, and unaccompanied by movement. Others see only one, always standing in a place that should be empty sky or steep drop. No footprints are found outside. No paths lead to these positions. The most unsettling detail is the lack of response. Knocking on the glass produces no sound and no reaction. Gestures go unnoticed. The figures do not acknowledge observation in any visible way. As daylight fades, the experience intensifies. The silence becomes heavier, pressing inward. Ear pressure grows more pronounced. Visual contrast increases, making shadows deeper and highlights harsher. The figures remain visible longer at dusk, standing clearly against the dimming landscape. At night, the lookout becomes a chamber of absence. Darkness surrounds the glass, and interior lights reflect faintly back, creating layers of image and shadow. Figures sometimes appear closer than, positioned just beyond the reach of light. The history of High Silence Lookout offers few explanations. It was constructed to monitor weather patterns and provide a vantage point for early warning systems. Instruments once recorded wind, temperature, and visibility. Over time, equipment was removed, leaving only the structure behind. Technicians noted unusual acoustic conditions even during its early use. Radios functioned poorly. Signals weakened unexpectedly. Conversations required repetition even at close range. These observations were documented but never fully explored. Some suggest geological factors. The ridge may absorb vibration. Air pressure patterns may interfere with sound transmission. These explanations account for some effects but not all. They do not explain the figures, or the uniformity of reports across different conditions. Despite the unease, the lookout does not induce panic. The silence is controlled, almost deliberate. It does not escalate suddenly. It remains constant, inviting stillness rather than flight. Many visitors find themselves standing longer than intended, watching the horizon without sound to interrupt thought. Leaving the lookout produces immediate relief. Sound returns gradually at first, then fully. Footsteps regain their weight. Voices carry again. The pressure in the ears releases, often with a sudden clarity that feels almost startling. Looking back, the structure appears unchanged. No figures remain visible. The glass reflects only sky and land. Daytime visitors sometimes dismiss the experience as atmospheric, yet those who linger long enough notice the same effects. Silence deepens. Sound withdraws. The environment behaves differently within that boundary. The absence of sound becomes a presence of its own, shaping perception and drawing attention inward. High silence lookout does not announce itself as strange. It offers views and shelter, nothing more. Yet within its walls, the absence of sound becomes a presence of its own, shaping perception and drawing attention inward. Those who leave carry the memory of standing where the world stopped speaking. Where footsteps vanished, voices failed, and figures watched without sound. It remains a place defined not by what happens there, but by what is removed, leaving visitors alone. With awareness and an unsettling quiet that cannot be fully explained. Smoke Ghost Lookout rises from a scarred ridge where the forest once stood dense and green. From a distance, the structure appears intact, a simple cabin perched above long slopes of regrowth and ash-stained soil. The land around it still bears the marks of a wildfire that moved too fast and burned too hot, leaving behind silence where life once crowded every inch. The fire came during a dry season when wind shifted without warning. Flames climbed uphill with frightening speed, leaping gaps that should have slowed them. The lookout crew saw the smoke column early, but escape routes closed faster than expected. By the time evacuation orders reached the ridge, the fire had already surrounded much of the area. Official reports speak carefully about what happened next. The lookout was abandoned under extreme conditions. Equipment was left behind. Doors were closed hastily. The structure survived the blaze, but the cost was high enough that the site was never returned to service. Afterward, the Forest Service marked the lookout as unsafe. and left it to weather alone. Years passed. The forest began to recover in patches. From a distance, Smoke Ghost Lookout looked peaceful again. Yet those who ventured near quickly noticed that something was wrong. Visitors often report smelling smoke long before they reach the cabin. The scent is sharp and unmistakable, like fresh burn carried on wind. It clings to clothing and breath, lingering even when the air is clear and cool. Weather records confirm that no active fires are present during these encounters. The smell appears without warning and fades just as suddenly. Some assume the scent comes from scorched wood baked by sun. Others point to buried ash stirred by shifting soil. These explanations account for traces, but not for the intensity reported on calm days, when no breeze moves and the air remains still. Inside the lookout, the smell sometimes grows stronger. It settles into the cabin as though trapped there, pooling in corners and along the floor. Visitors describe feeling a tightening in the chest, not painful, but heavy, like a remembered fear rather than a physical threat. Night brings more unsettling experiences. From the windows, figures appear to move outside among the darkened slopes. They flicker at the edge of vision, shaped by light that resembles flame but produces no heat. These phantom flames rise and fall silently, casting shifting shadows that do not match the terrain. Within these shifting lights, silhouettes can be seen walking steadily across the ground. They do not run. They do not gesture. They move with purpose, as though following paths that no longer exist. When stared at directly, they fade, leaving only darkness and the faint scent of smoke. Those who remain inside the cabin feel watched from every direction. Windows reflect nothing clearly. The outside world seems distant, separated by more than glass. Sounds behave strangely, muffled and delayed, as if the forest itself is reluctant to speak. Some visitors report hearing soft movement on the ridge, footsteps crunching lightly where ash once fell thickest. When they step outside to investigate, the ground lies undisturbed. No tracks appear. The night remains still. Historical accounts from the time of the fire include fragmented observations. Crews described walls of flame moving like living things. Smoke so thick it erased distance and direction. Moments where visibility dropped to nothing and the only guide was memory and instinct. Survivors wrote of disorientation, of feeling surrounded even when escape remained possible. Local residents say the fire changed the ridge permanently. They believe that intense events leave impressions, not only on land, but on the space itself. According to them, the lookout stands at a place where fear and urgency once peaked, and that energy never fully dissipated. Scientific explanations offer partial comfort. Smell memory can be triggered by association. Light can bend strangely through regrowing vegetation and night air. Fatigue and isolation heighten perception. Each theory holds weight, yet none explain why multiple visitors report the same details without prior knowledge. The phantom flames behave consistently. They appear most often on clear nights, when stars are bright and wind is low. They do not spread. They do not consume. They simply move, tracing lines that mirror old fire paths recorded in maps and reports. Those who stay too long inside the lookout describe a growing unease. Not panic, but pressure. Breathing becomes shallow. Many leave before morning. By daylight, the forest below glows with new life. Birds move through young trees. The air smells clean again. Visitors question what they experienced, searching for logical explanations. Yet the scent of smoke sometimes returns without warning, drifting through open windows or clinging to hands that touch the cabin walls. It fades slowly, leaving behind a reminder that something powerful once passed through and never fully left. At night, when the ridge grows quiet and the forest holds its breath, phantom flames rise again outside the windows. Figures move through light that gives no warmth. And the smell of smoke returns, carrying echoes of urgency, loss, and a moment when fire ruled the land and left behind a presence that still walks among the shadows. From its platform, the landscape spreads outward in clean layers. Pine ridges in the distance. A river cutting silver lines through shadow. Dirt roads that vanish into forest and reappear miles later. The lookout was built to help people. Rangers once used it to scan for smoke, guide hikers, and relay warnings when weather turned suddenly dangerous. It should have been a reliable point of contact. Instead, it became the place where contact fails. Visitors arrive expecting a standard overlook with railings, signage, and maybe a small shelter. They find all of that, but they also find something harder to describe. A subtle tension in the air, like the space is filled with quiet interference. The wind here feels dry and thin, carrying a faint electrical bite that disappears the moment you step off the ridge. Radios drop out without warning. Handheld units that work perfectly on the trail go silent at the platform. The display remains lit, but the sound turns to empty hiss. Channel scans return nothing. Even strong local signals vanish, as if the lookout exists inside a pocket where transmission cannot settle. Cell phones behave inconsistently. Some lose service completely. Others show bars but refuse to load anything. Calls connect briefly, then cut into silence. Text messages send and never arrive, or arrive hours later when the visitor is already far down the mountain. Local rangers have tested the area repeatedly. They bring professional radios, backup batteries, and spare antennas. They try different frequencies and repeaters. The same thing happens. The closer they stand to the platform, the weaker the signal becomes. A few steps away, reception returns. No obvious source explains it. There are no towers nearby, no heavy equipment, no hidden generators. No hidden generators. Yet the failures continue, reported across seasons and years, consistent enough to earn the name Lost Signal Lookout. Then there are the lights. The lookout has a small shelter with a solar-powered fixture meant to illuminate signage and the steps after dusk. Visitors assume loose wiring. Maintenance crews check it and find nothing wrong. The battery holds charge. The connections are stable. And yet, the fixture passes every test. And yet, when darkness falls and the ridge grows quiet, the light behaves as if someone unseen is tapping a switch. The most unsettling reports begin when someone brings a radio and listens long enough. Within that hiss, faint voices appear. Not clear speech, not loud enough to understand fully, but structured enough to feel intentional. Some describe it as an emergency call caught between frequencies. A strained voice. A burst of numbers. A repeated request that dissolves back into noise before it can be recognized. It happens most often at dusk, when the valley below turns dark and the ridge feels suspended between day and night. Those who hear it rarely forget the tone. It carries urgency without clarity, as if the message has been traveling too long, worn down by distance and interference until only emotion remains. Rangers have their own stories. Years ago, when the lookout was still used for patrol coordination, operators noted odd interruptions during routine checks. Voices would break through standard channels for a moment, faint and distorted. They sounded like calls for help, but not from any team in the area. Coordinates did not match. No incident reports followed. Eventually, standard practice changed. Rangers were told not to rely on the lookout for transmission. They used alternative points on the ridge where signals remained stable. The platform became a place for observation only, not communication. But the voices continued. The Mountaina's history offers fragments that do not fit neatly. Long before modern radios, this ridge served as a waypoint for search parties. The valley below is beautiful but unforgiving. Fog rolls in quickly. Rivers rise after storms. Trails split and rejoin in ways that confuse even experienced hikers. Over decades, there were rescues and near misses, and a handful of cases that ended without resolution. Records describe nights when a whistle was heard, faint and repeating, leading searchers deeper into the forest without finding anyone. Lantern signals reported from ridges that should have been empty. Calls that seemed close, then far, then gone entirely. Lost Signal Lookout sits above all of it. Some believe the ridge holds a kind of echo, not of sound alone, but of distress. A place where urgent moments gathered over time and left impressions in the air, impressions that modern equipment translates into static and broken speech. Skeptics point to geology. Certain rock formations can interfere with radio waves. Atmospheric conditions can bend signals unpredictably. Solar activity can create unusual noise. These factors may explain intermittent failures, but they do not explain why the effect is strongest at one platform and weakens just steps away. They do not explain the patterns in the flickering light. They do not explain why multiple visitors report hearing the same kind of faint emergency call, always urgent, always incomplete. Those who respond to the voices feel a change. A tightening in the chest. A sudden focus that makes the ridge feel smaller, the valley deeper. Some instinctively try to call back, speaking into radios that cannot carry their words. Others scan the forest below, convinced someone is out there, just beyond sight, waiting for a reply. Nothing answers. Only static, and the occasional pulse of a voice that seems to be calling from another time, another distance, another urgent moment. Most visitors leave quickly after that. As they descend, their devices recover. Radios catch clear signals again. The world returns to normal function with unsettling ease, as if the lookout was never part of it. But the memory of that static remains. The flicker of light against dark rock. The sense that something tried to come through, and almost succeeded. Lost Signal Lookout still stands on the ridge, offering wide views and a strange kind of silence. It is a place built for connection that now feels defined by absence. And in the thin air above the valley, where radios fail and lights pulse on their own, faint emergency calls continue to echo through static. Waiting for someone to hear them clearly. Waiting for someone to answer. Pine Hollow Lookout rises above a dense stretch of forest where the ground dips and folds in quiet patterns. The tower is tall but slender, built of timber anchored into rock, designed to sway slightly under pressure. From a distance it looks stable, a familiar silhouette against the sky. Only when you step inside do you realize how much it moves. The sway is gentle, almost comforting at first. A slow shift from side to side, barely noticeable unless you focus on it. Rangers who once worked here described it as a natural response to height and design. Wind moves through the forest, they said, and the tower moves with it. But there are days when the air is completely still. On those days, the tower continues to sway. Visitors notice it most when standing near the windows. The horizon drifts a fraction to the left, then back again. People often step outside to confirm what they felt. The trees below stand motionless. Leaves do not stir. The sky remains calm. Returning inside, the sway resumes as if it never stopped. For years, it served its purpose well. Records show long shifts spent alone, one person at a time, scanning the forest for smoke. Wood expands and contracts. Nails creak softly. Stairs whisper under shifting weight. These noises are expected, familiar, easy to dismiss. What comes later is not. After midnight, when the forest settles and the tower grows quiet, a new sound emerges from below. It is faint, easy to confuse with wind passing through the structure. A slow, steady rise and fall, barely audible. Those who hear it often freeze, listening, trying to locate its source. The sound does not move. It remains centered, directly below the room. Some describe the breathing as shallow. Others say it is deep and patient. All agree it is unmistakably rhythmic. The first instinct is to assume an animal has found its way underneath the tower. A trapped creature, perhaps. Visitors check access points. They shine lights through gaps. They find nothing. The breathing continues. Those who stay awake long enough notice that the sound changes slightly depending on where they stand. Near the center of the room, it is louder. Near the walls, it softens, as though the floor itself is carrying the sound upward. Sleep becomes difficult. Each creak of the tower blends with the breathing, creating the impression of shared movement. The sway of the structure seems to match the rhythm below, left and right, inhale and exhale. At some point before dawn, the sound fades. Not abruptly, but gradually, like someone falling asleep. Morning brings silence and clarity. The floorboards are solid. Nothing beneath them stirs. Then there are the windows. Pine Hollow Lookout has wide panes meant to provide unobstructed views of the forest. By day, they reflect sky and treetops. By night, they become mirrors, catching interior light against darkness. Guests report noticing marks on the glass after waking. They appear faintly, outlined in moisture or dust, as though someone pressed their palms against the outside of the window. Fingers are visible, spread naturally, positioned at varying heights. Some prints are small. Others larger. None match the position of anyone inside the room. What unsettles most is their orientation. They are not smeared or dragged. They are clear impressions, appearing suddenly and fading slowly as the air warms. Attempts to recreate them from inside fail. The angle is wrong. The reach does not align. No ladder stands outside the tower. The windows sit high above the ground, accessible only from within. Staff members clean the glass regularly. They never see the prints form. They only notice them after they are already there. Some guests report hearing a soft tapping during the night, too gentle to wake fully, like fingers resting against glass. Others say they felt a pressure change in the room, a subtle shift that made the air feel thicker. The sway of the tower, the breathing beneath the floor, the handprints on the windows all seem connected by timing rather than cause. Locals offer theories quietly. They say the hollow beneath the tower is deeper than expected, that the ground there carries sound in strange ways. Others believe the lookout stands on a place where the forest itself gathers, where roots and soil press close beneath the structure. There are stories of a former watcher who stayed longer than anyone else, who preferred nights to days, who felt more comfortable listening than looking. Engineers have inspected Pine Hollow Lookout many times. They find no structural issues. The sway falls within acceptable limits. The foundation is secure. There is no space beneath the floor large enough to hold a person. Despite this, visitors continue to report the same experiences. They describe the feeling of being held rather than threatened. The breathing is not aggressive. The handprints do not strike the glass. The sway is gentle, never violent. Everything about the tower suggests presence without intention. Those who leave often say the forest feels different afterward. Sounds seem clearer. Stillness feels heavier. They become more aware of their own breathing, their own movement through space. Pine Hollow Lookout remains standing, open to those willing to climb its stairs and spend time above the trees. Many pass through without incident. Others carry the memory of a night when the tower moved on its own. When breath rose from below. And when unseen hands rested quietly against the glass. As the sun rises and the forest wakes, the tower settles into daylight stillness. The sway becomes unnoticeable. The floorboards are silent. The windows are clear. But when night returns and the forest grows quiet, Pine Hollow Lookout begins its slow motion once more. Breathing with something beneath it. Waiting for someone to notice. Fogline Lookout stands at the edge of a steep escarpment where land gives way to open air. Built to provide clear sight across valleys and ridges. It was designed for visibility, for distance, for certainty. Yet clarity is the one thing this place rarely offers. Fog arrives here without warning. On clear mornings, the sky can be bright and the air sharp. Then, within minutes, a pale wall drifts upward from below. sliding across the slope with quiet confidence. It moves faster than weather patterns should, rolling in thick layers that swallow trees, trails, and depth itself. Once it reaches the lookout, it settles in and refuses to lift. Visitors often expect the fog to thin after a short time. It does not. The mist clings to the landscape as if anchored. Wind passes through without dispersing it. Sunlight brightens the fog but never clears it. Hours can pass with no change, the world reduced to shifting white and muted sound. The world reduced to shifting white and muted sound. Fogline Lookout becomes an island suspended above nothing. Standing at the railing produces a strange effect. The fog below does not remain uniform. It folds and stretches, opening gaps that last only seconds. In these brief moments, shapes appear within the mist. Darker forms that suggest movement. Upright figures standing where ground should be visible. They do not emerge fully. They linger just long enough to be noticed. The fog shifts. The shapes dissolve instantly. As if erased. No trace remains. The fog closes again. Smooth and blank. Leaving viewers questioning what they saw. Many assume their eyes adjusted incorrectly. Depth perception fails easily in mist. The mind fills in gaps. But the figures return. Different people describe them differently. Some see solitary shapes standing still. Others glimpse multiple forms moving slowly in opposite directions. A few report seeing figures that appear to look upward, their outlines briefly clearer before vanishing. No two sightings are identical, yet all share the same timing. They appear only when the fog is at its thickest. Rangers assigned to Fogline Lookout acknowledge the phenomenon quietly. They note that the area is prone to temperature inversions that trap moisture. Fog behaves unpredictably here. Shapes can form due to shifting density and shadow. These explanations are technically sound. They do not explain why the figures appear upright. The terrain was dangerous, visibility unreliable. Old reports mention lost time. Travelers entering fog banks that seemed shallow but lasted for hours. Voices echoed without source. When Fogline Lookout was constructed, it was meant to solve these problems. A fixed point above the fog. A place to see clearly and warn those below. Ironically, it became part of the same pattern. Inside the lookout, the air feels different during heavy fog. Sound is muted, as if absorbed. Footsteps lose their echo. Conversations drop instinctively to a whisper. Visitors report a sensation of pressure behind the eyes, like focusing too hard on a distant object that never resolves. The figures below appear most often when no one is actively watching. People turn away from the railing, distracted for a moment, then glance back. That is when the shapes are there. The instant attention locks onto them, they disappear. The timing feels deliberate, as though the fog itself decides when to reveal and conceal. Others look away repeatedly, attempting to catch the moment again. The figures return only when attention relaxes. At night, the fog grows denser still. Lights from the lookout do little to penetrate it. Instead, they create glowing halos that reflect back inward. The world beyond the railing ceases to exist entirely. In these conditions, the sense of depth becomes unsettling. Figures are harder to distinguish at night, yet some insist they remain present. Darker shadows moving within darker fog. The impression of motion rather than form. The certainty that something is there, just out of reach of sight. Those who stay overnight report vivid dreams. Images of walking without horizon. Of following shapes that fade before they can be reached. Of standing still while fog flows past like water. Waking brings relief, but also disappointment, as if something unfinished was left behind. Scientists studying the area note that fog can create optical illusions known as specters, where shadows are cast onto mist and appear as figures. These effects usually depend on light sources behind the observer. At Fogline Lookout, the figures appear even when lighting conditions should not allow it. Maintenance crews working below the lookout rarely experience the same phenomena. On the ground, the fog is disorienting but ordinary. It is only from above that the figures take shape. Only from a position of supposed clarity. Perhaps that is the point. Fogline Lookout was built to observe, to define, to see through uncertainty. Instead, it confronts visitors with the limits of perception. The figures do not threaten. They do not approach. They appear briefly, then retreat, leaving questions rather than fear. As the fog eventually thins, the landscape returns slowly. Trees emerge. Trails reappear. Depth restores itself in careful layers. The lookout regains its purpose, its view stretching wide and confident once more. Visitors descend with a lingering sense of doubt. They replay what they saw, what they almost saw. They check photographs that show nothing unusual. They search for explanations that fit neatly into reason. Some succeed. Others do not. Fogline Lookout remains above it all, waiting. When the fog rolls in again, sudden and absolute, the world below dissolves. And within that shifting white, figures stand briefly, just long enough to be seen, before the mist closes and they vanish once more. Burn Scar Lookout stands on the edge of a wide clearing where the forest still bears the memory of fire. Blackened trunks rise from pale soil, their tops broken and uneven, frozen in the moment the flames passed through. New growth has begun, thin grasses and small shoots pushing upward, but the land has not forgotten what happened here. The lookout was built after the fire, positioned to oversee the scar and monitor recovery. From a distance it appears modest and functional, a simple structure meant for observation and safety. As visitors approach, the air changes. The scent of charred wood lingers even years later, faint but unmistakable, carried on shifting wind. Stepping onto the platform brings a sense of weight that is difficult to define. It is not fear or anxiety, but something quieter and heavier, a feeling that settles into the chest and remains. Wind moves across the burned hillside in uneven currents. It passes through standing dead trees and hollow trunks, producing low tones that rise and fall. Within these sounds, visitors sometimes hear coughing. It is soft at first, easily mistaken for wind breaking against wood. With time, it becomes clearer, rhythmic and strained, drifting across the clearing without a visible source. The coughing never feels close. It remains distant, carried by air that shifts direction without warning. Listening too closely makes it harder to locate, as if the sound recedes when attention focuses on it. Between these moments, other noises sometimes appear. Distant cries move through the scarred forest, brief and indistinct. They do not resemble animal calls or birdsong. The sound is human in tone, stretched thin by distance and wind. It rises once, then fades, leaving silence behind. The cries do not repeat in predictable patterns, and they never approach the lookout itself. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere changes further. The walls are clean and well maintained. Windows face the burned landscape on all sides, offering wide views of the scar. Despite this openness, the interior feels enclosed, as if the weight outside presses inward. Visitors often notice ash inside the cabin. Fine gray particles appear on the floor or along window sills, even when the air outside is clear. Fine gray particles appear on the floor or along window sills, even when the air outside is clear. There is no fireplace, no stove, no recent fire activity nearby. There is no fireplace, no stove, no recent fire activity nearby. The ash gathers lightly, forming thin streaks and patches that seem to settle on their own. Staff members clean the cabin regularly. Ash is swept away and surfaces wiped clean. By the next day, it may return. The amount is never large, but it is persistent enough to draw attention. The particles are cool to the touch and leave faint marks when brushed aside. Standing inside the cabin during quiet hours heightens awareness of sound. The coughing outside becomes more noticeable through the walls, as though the structure carries it inward. The cries remain distant, filtered and softened by glass, but still present enough to unsettle. The history of the fire adds context to these experiences. The blaze moved quickly through this area, driven by wind and dry conditions. Evacuations were rushed. Visibility dropped. The air filled with smoke thick enough to block sunlight. People fled in confusion, guided by instinct and fragments of information. Records describe the fire in terms of acreage and response time. What they do not fully capture is the human experience of those hours. The lookout stands where the fire burned hottest, where escape routes narrowed and choices became limited. Visitors who spend time here often describe a sense of shared memory, as if the land holds impressions of what occurred. The burned forest takes on a different appearance at sunset. The air cools rapidly. Wind patterns shift again, bringing with them the coughing, sometimes clearer than before. Inside the cabin, ash may drift into view, appearing along corners or near door frames. Despite these experiences, the lookout does not feel dangerous. There is no sense of threat or urgency. The sorrow is heavy but contained. It invites reflection rather than action. Many visitors find themselves standing still for long periods, looking out over the scar in silence. Morning light brings partial relief. The coughing fades into wind. Cries are no longer heard. Ash still appears from time to time, but less frequently. The landscape looks calmer, softened by daylight and the promise of continued regrowth. Those who leave burned scar lookout often do so quietly. Conversations remain subdued. The weight felt upon arrival does not vanish immediately. It lingers, following visitors down the trail and into living forest beyond the scar. Looking back, the lookout appears small against the vast burned area. It does not dominate the landscape. It observes it. The structure serves as a reminder of what fire leaves behind long after flames are gone. Burned scar lookout exists not to frighten, but to remember. The coughing, the distant cries, the unexplained ash all feel like echoes of a moment when the land and those within it endured something overwhelming. The sorrow carried here does not seek attention. It simply remains, woven into wind and soil, waiting for those who pause long enough to feel it. Lone Watcher Lookout rises from a broad hill where the forest thins and the wind has room to roam. The tower is narrow and tall, built to see far in every direction. From its windows, the land unfolds in slow waves of trees and distant ridges, a view that feels endless and exposed. It was a place designed for patience, not company. For many years, a single ranger lived here year-round. While other lookouts rotated staff with the seasons, this one remained occupied through winter storms and long summers alike. The ranger kept watch alone, scanning the horizon for smoke, recording weather patterns, and maintaining the tower with quiet diligence. Supplies arrived infrequently. Visitors were rare. Solitude was part of the assignment. Records describe the ranger as reliable and methodical. Logs were kept carefully. Equipment was maintained beyond requirement. Notes mention the rhythm of daily patrols around the base of the tower, boots circling the structure each evening before night fell. It was a habit meant to check for damage or wildlife, but it also marked the close of each day. When the ranger eventually left the post, the tower was not immediately reassigned. Budget changes and new monitoring methods made year-round occupancy unnecessary. The lookout stood empty, preserved for occasional use but no longer lived in. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then the reports began. Visitors staying overnight heard footsteps circling the tower after dark. The sound was steady and unhurried, matching the pace of someone walking with purpose. Gravel shifted softly. Leaves rustled just beyond the light. The steps traced a clear path around the base, completing one full circuit before continuing again. Those inside the tower waited for the footsteps to approach the stairs. They never did. The sound remained outside, looping endlessly, as if the walker had no need to enter. When visitors gathered the courage to look out the windows, they saw nothing. The ground lay empty. The forest stood still. Yet the footsteps continued, perfectly timed, unaffected by observation. Inside the lookout, another detail drew attention. A single wooden chair sat near the central window, positioned to face the horizon. It was old but sturdy, its runners worn smooth from years of use. Guests noticed that late at night, the chair began to rock gently. Back and forth, slow and deliberate, as though guided by an invisible weight settling into familiar motion. The chair rocked even when the air was still and no one stood near it. Some attempted to stop it, placing a hand on the backrest. The rocking paused under touch, only to resume moments later once the hand was removed. Others moved the chair across the room. By morning, it was often found close to its original position. Staff members who occasionally checked the lookout offered practical explanations. Wind pressure changes could cause vibrations. Temperature shifts might affect balance. Footsteps could be animals moving in repetitive paths. Each explanation sounded reasonable on its own. Together, they felt incomplete. Historical journals provide insight into the ranger's routine. Night entries mention walking the perimeter to clear the mind before sleep. Notes describe sitting in the chair after sunset, watching the light fade and the stars appear. The chair is mentioned often, always placed by the same window. Some entries express comfort in these rituals. The ranger wrote about the importance of keeping to a schedule, of moving and resting at the same times each day. The repetition seemed to anchor him, giving shape to long stretches of isolation. After the lookout was vacated, those patterns did not disappear. Guests report that the footsteps begin shortly after dusk, around the time the ranger once made his rounds. The chair starts rocking later, often when the tower has grown completely quiet and the forest below has settled into darkness. The presence, if it can be called that, feels focused rather than restless. The footsteps never rush. They never approach the stairs. The chair rocks without violence or noise. Some visitors describe an odd reassurance in the sounds. The footsteps mark time. The rocking chair suggests watchfulness. The tower feels occupied, but not invaded. Others find the experience deeply unsettling. Sleep becomes difficult. The sense of being accompanied in such a remote place weighs heavily on the mind. A few visitors leave before sunrise, unable to explain why staying feels wrong. Local hikers tell stories of seeing a light in the tower long after it was officially closed. A faint glow moving from window to window, then disappearing. No maintenance logs support these sightings, yet they persist in quiet conversation. At dawn, everything stops. The footsteps fade. The chair rests motionless. Morning light reveals an empty tower, unchanged and orderly. The forest stretches out below, indifferent and calm. Those who spent the night often question what they experienced. Fatigue, expectation, and isolation can alter perception. Yet the consistency of reports, the matching details across years, suggests something more than imagination. Lone Watcher Lookout remains standing, its purpose largely fulfilled by newer technology. It still offers shelter and an unmatched view. But it also carries the imprint of one life lived in watchful solitude. Each night, as darkness settles over the hills, the tower returns to its old rhythm. Footsteps circle the base, steady and familiar. Inside, a chair rocks gently, facing the horizon. The watch continues, not out of duty now, but out of habit. A reminder that some routines, once repeated long enough, do not end when the watcher leaves. They remain, marking time in quiet motion, ensuring that even in isolation, the lookout is never truly alone. The structure itself is narrow and vertical, built to save space rather than provide comfort. A single tower of weathered wood and steel, accessed by a steep interior staircase that coils upward toward the observation room. From the outside, it looks stable enough. From the inside, the climb feels far longer than it should. The stairs are the first thing visitors notice. They are uneven, worn smooth in places and jagged in others. Some steps dip slightly underfoot. Others tilt just enough to demand attention. Handrails line the wall, cold and scarred from decades of use. The climb requires focus, especially in low light or bad weather. Several accidents happened here during the Lukuta's early years. Rangers slipped during long shifts. Maintenance workers misjudged steps while carrying equipment. A few visitors lost footing near the upper section, where the staircase narrows and the angle steepens. None of the incidents were dramatic enough to close the structure permanently, but the pattern was clear. The stairs were unforgiving. Repairs were made over time, yet the layout could not be fully corrected without rebuilding the tower. Warning signs were posted. Staff advised caution. Still, people continued to visit, drawn by the view and the isolation. As use declined, the lookout grew quieter. That is when the sounds began. Visitors climbing late in the day reported hearing scraping noises below them. At first, it sounded like loose debris shifting against wood. A slow drag. A pause. Then another scrape, steady and deliberate, following the rhythm of ascent. Those who stopped moving noticed the sound continued. It rose from below, step by step, as if something was pulling itself upward along the stairs. Not walking. Not climbing normally. Dragging, with effort, toward the top. Most assumed another visitor was behind them. They called out, received no response, and continued climbing, only to realize no one had entered after them. The scraping continued regardless, closing the distance slowly, persistently. The sound always stops at the same place. Just outside the door to the observation room. Visitors described reaching the landing with their heart racing, listening as the scraping climbs the final steps, then halts abruptly. No footsteps follow. No knock. Just silence pressed close against the door. Those who open it find nothing. The staircase below is empty. The sound does not resume. It is as if whatever reached the top could go no farther. Caretakers assigned to the lookout experienced the same thing. One ranger reported hearing the scraping during a night storm, amplified by the hollow tower. He stood at the top, flashlight aimed downward, watching the steps remain empty while the sound approached. When it stopped, the sudden quiet felt heavier than the noise itself. After that, overnight assignments became rare. The sound does not occur every time. Days can pass without incident. Then, without warning, it returns, always the same pace, always the same ending. Visitors who hear it often describe a sensation of strain in their legs and chest, as if their own effort on the stairs echoes something older, something unfinished. The Lukuda's history offers fragments but no single explanation. Early logs mention a worker injured during construction, unable to climb the stairs unassisted for weeks. Another record notes a ranger who fell near the upper section and had to pull himself upward to reach help. The details are sparse, written as routine notes rather than dramatic events. No fatal incident is formally recorded. And yet the sound suggests effort without relief. Movement without completion. Engineers have inspected the staircase repeatedly. These explanations account for random creaks and shifts, but not for the steady, ascending scrape that mirrors human motion so closely. Analysis shows no clear mechanical source. The sound lacks the randomness typical of structural movement. The sound follows a pattern too precise to dismiss easily. Those who linger inside the observation room after hearing it describe a strange pressure near the door. Not force, but presence. As if something rests just beyond the threshold, close enough to sense, unable or unwilling to cross. The feeling fades slowly, leaving behind unease rather than fear. The view from the windows, the land stretches outward in wide, quiet layers. Forest, rock, distant water. The world feels orderly and open, a sharp contrast to the confined climb that led there. Some visitors choose to wait inside until sunset. As light fades, the tower cools, and sound carries more easily. The scraping has been reported most often during these hours, when shadows deepen along the stairs and the interior feels detached from the outside world. No one has reported seeing anything on the steps. The experience is entirely auditory. That absence makes it harder to dismiss and harder to confront. There is nothing to point to, nothing to watch, only the sound of effort rising toward you. Many leave quickly after hearing it. They descend the stairs cautiously, alert to every creak beneath their feet. The staircase feels different afterward, heavier, as though it remembers being climbed the wrong way, by the wrong motion. Once outside, the sensation lifts. Wind and open space restore perspective. The tower stands quiet again, offering no sign of what occurred inside. The door remains closed. The stairs wait. Broken stair lookout is still accessible. Signs warn visitors to watch their footing. Rangers share the standard safety advice. They do not mention the sound unless asked directly, and even then, explanations remain careful and measured. Yet those who have heard the scraping recognize it instantly in descriptions from others. The slow drag upward. The pause at each step. The final stop at the door. It feels less like a haunting and more like repetition. A motion remembered by the structure itself, replayed without emotion, without resolution. The stairs continue to rise within the tower, narrow and demanding. And sometimes, when no one should be climbing, they echo with the sound of something still trying to reach the top, stopping just short of the place it can never enter. Needle Point Lookout stands on a narrow peak that rises sharply above the surrounding forest, a solitary structure balanced against sky and distance. From the platform, the view stretches in every direction, layers of hills fading into the horizon, valleys folding into one another like waves frozen in motion. The lookout was built here for that reason alone. Nothing escapes the eye from this height. Smoke, storms, movement across the forest floor, all of it becomes visible long before it reaches the mountain. For years, watchers climbed the steep path to take their place, trusting the peak to give them sight and silence in equal measure. At night, the silence deepens. The forest below turns into a single dark mass, textured only by moonlight and shadow. Sounds travel upward strangely, distorted by distance and slope. A gust of wind can seem to circle the tower before passing on. Those who stay overnight often step onto the platform after dusk, drawn by the vastness. The sky feels close enough to touch. That is usually when the lights appear. At first, they are easy to dismiss. A single point of pale glow far below, near the edge of the forest. Then a second light appears. Then another. They emerge one by one, scattered across the forest floor, never clustering too closely together. Each light moves slowly, deliberately, tracing a path that seems to angle upward toward the peak. The motion is smooth, unhurried, and consistent, as though guided by intention rather than terrain. Those watching feel a subtle tightening in their focus. The lights are too steady for fireflies, too coordinated to be random reflections. They do not bob or sway like lanterns carried by people. They glide, maintaining an even height regardless of slope or obstacle. As the night deepens, the lights draw closer. From the lookout, it becomes clear that they are not following trails. They pass through dense sections of forest without slowing, weaving between trees without altering course. No sound accompanies them. No voices rise from below. The forest remains otherwise still. Some nights there are only a few lights. Other nights there are many, forming loose lines that curve toward the mountain. The distance between them remains constant, as if measured. As the lights approach the base of the peak, they slow. They never climb the steepest sections. Instead, they gather just below the final rise, hovering among the trees where the slope becomes too sharp. From the lookout, this creates the impression of something waiting, positioned just out of sight beneath the rock face. The feeling of being watched intensifies. Not from the forest, but from the space between. The lights do not blink or pulse. They hold steady, as if aware of the tower above, as if aware of those standing there, looking down. Some people report a sudden urge to turn off the lookout's own light, to reduce visibility. Others feel compelled to remain perfectly still, afraid that movement might draw attention. The lights remain for hours. They do not climb. They do not retreat. They wait until the first signs of dawn soften the sky. As morning approaches, the glow begins to fade. One by one, the lights dim and vanish, dissolving into the gray of early light. By sunrise, the forest below looks entirely ordinary. Those who descend the mountain often do so with urgency, eager to confirm what they saw. The path down is steep but clear. Dew clings to rocks and roots. The forest floor shows no disturbance. No tracks. No footprints. No marks. No broken branches. No signs of campfires or passage. Even in soft soil, nothing suggests movement occurred during the night. The ground appears untouched. Repeated searches yield the same result. The forest offers no evidence of what the lookout reveals. Locals have their explanations. Some say the lights are reflections from mineral deposits that react to temperature changes. Others suggest atmospheric effects, rare and poorly understood. These ideas circulate quietly, never fully satisfying. Old journals from former watchers mention similar sightings, written cautiously, without interpretation. Notes describe lights approaching but never arriving. Observations repeat across decades, separated by time but identical in detail. What unsettles many is the consistency. The lights always appear after full darkness. They always move closer. They always stop below the peak. They always vanish by morning, leaving no trace. No one has ever seen them during the day. No one has ever encountered them at ground level. Needle Point Lookout continues to operate, maintained and accessible to those willing to climb. Most visitors come for the views, for the sense of standing above the world. Many leave without witnessing anything unusual. But those who stay overnight and keep watch through the long hours of darkness often leave changed. They speak less about what they saw and more about how it felt. The sense of distance closing. The quiet certainty of approach. The way the forest below seemed to hold its breath. Standing on the sharp peak as night settles, with endless views stretching outward, it becomes clear why the lookout was placed here. It was meant to see what others could not. And sometimes, in the deep stillness before dawn, Needle Point Lookout reveals movement where none should exist. Lights that climb without climbing. Paths that leave no trace. By morning, the mountain returns to silence, the forest to stillness, and the peak stands alone once more, waiting for night to fall and the distant glow to rise again. Shadowline Lookout stands on a ridge chosen for its sweeping view and clean angles of light. The structure is modern compared to older towers, built with wide glass panels meant to reduce blind spots and reflect the landscape behind the observer. From the outside, it appears precise and orderly. From the inside, something feels misaligned. During daylight, the lookout behaves as expected at first glance. Sunlight pours through the windows, tracing clear lines across the floor. Shadows fall where they should, stretching and shrinking as the sun moves. Visitors relax, trusting the familiar logic of light and time. After spending several minutes inside, people begin to notice subtle inconsistencies. A shadow shifts even though the sun has not moved. A dark line slides across the wall at an angle that does not match any object in the room. Shadows drift independently, gliding across surfaces without an obvious source. Visitors step closer to windows, checking the landscape for passing clouds or birds. Nothing explains what they see. The effect grows stronger as the day progresses. By late afternoon, the interior of Shadowline Lookout feels layered, as if multiple light sources are competing for control. Shadows overlap where they should not. Some appear to detach briefly from the objects that cast them, lingering a fraction of a second longer than expected before snapping back into place. The most unsettling experiences involve the glass itself. The wide windows reflect the interior faintly, especially when light levels shift. Visitors moving through the room occasionally catch glimpses of shapes behind them in the reflection. A figure standing near the doorway. A silhouette just beyond the railing. The forms appear human in outline, upright and still. Instinct takes over. People turn quickly, expecting to find another visitor sharing the space. Each time, the room is empty. No footsteps sound. When they look back at the glass, the reflection shows only their own image and the landscape beyond. Many laugh it off at first. Reflections play tricks on the eyes. Peripheral vision misfires. Fatigue fills in gaps. These explanations work until the reflections return with greater clarity. Some visitors report seeing different shapes, appearing and disappearing with each shift of light. Others see the same figure multiple times, always positioned just out of direct view. Their explanations are calm and practiced. Yet even they admit certain patterns are difficult to ignore. The reflections never appear when someone is actively looking for them. They show up during moments of distraction, when attention drifts. The instant a person focuses on the glass, the figure is gone. The timing feels precise, as if governed by awareness rather than physics. Historical notes on the site reveal an interesting detail. The ridge where Shadowline Lookout stands was once avoided by early surveyors. Journals describe strange light behavior along this line of elevation. When the lookout was planned, engineers chose the ridge for its stability and vantage point, unaware of its reputation. The modern structure amplified what the terrain already produced. Glass and steel replaced wood and stone, sharpening the effect rather than eliminating it. Visitors who remain inside the lookout for extended periods report a growing sense of disorientation. Depth perception shifts subtly. Distances feel compressed or stretched. Shadows on the floor appear closer than they are. Reflections in the glass seem slightly delayed, as if the image lags behind movement by a fraction of a second. The effect is not enough to cause panic, but enough to erode certainty. At dusk, shadowline lookout becomes most active. As natural light fades, artificial lighting inside creates a balance point. Shadows multiply and soften. Reflections grow stronger. Figures appear more frequently in the glass, sometimes clearer than before. A shoulder. A head. The outline of someone standing just behind the observer. Turning always reveals the same result. Empty space. No sound accompanies the appearances. No movement betrays a presence. The room remains still, as if holding its breath. Those who experience this often choose to step outside, seeking reassurance in open air and direct light. At night, the phenomenon changes again. Interior lights cast long shadows that should remain fixed. Instead, they slide gently across the walls, crossing paths without cause. Reflections in the glass show only darkness beyond, yet some visitors still sense figures nearby. The feeling is less visual now and more instinctive, like awareness without image. Sleep is not possible inside the lookout, but even brief stays leave an impression. People describe the sensation of being observed from angles they cannot identify. Not watched with intent, but registered, as if their presence is being noted. The effect fades slowly after leaving the site, lingering as a sense of unease when encountering reflective surfaces elsewhere. Scientists studying perception note that the human brain relies heavily on expectation to interpret light and shadow. When familiar rules are broken, the mind searches for meaning. This explanation accounts for part of the experience. It does not explain why so many people report the same patterns. Nor does it explain why the shadows seem to wait for attention to slip before moving. Shadowline Lookout was built to observe the world clearly, to reduce blind spots and expand vision. Instead, it reveals how easily perception can fracture. Light does not always behave. Shadows do not always obey. As visitors depart, they often glance back at the glass one last time. The reflection shows only themselves and the empty room behind. Still, many feel relief once the structure is out of sight. Shadowline Lookout remains on the ridge, catching light from every direction. Shadows slide across its interior, independent and quiet. Reflections form and vanish without warning. And for those who stand inside long enough, it becomes clear that the lookout is not just a place to see the world, but a place where the world looks back in ways that cannot be confirmed, only felt. Cold Ash Lookout stands on a ridge where the forest thins and the ground turns pale and rocky. The structure is simple and weathered, built for observation rather than comfort. From a distance it appears unremarkable, another quiet shelter place to watch weather and landscape. Up close, the air tells a different story. There has been no fire here for many years. Records confirm it. The surrounding trees show no burn scars, no blackened bark, no signs of recent flame. Yet the scent of burnt wood lingers around the lookout, faint but persistent, carried on still air as if trapped in the place itself. Visitors often notice it before they see the building clearly. The smell arrives unexpectedly, dry and sharp, unmistakable. It does not drift away with the breeze. It clings, strongest near the lookout walls and door, fading only slightly with distance. Stepping inside brings little relief. The scent remains, cooler somehow, as if stripped of warmth but not of presence. The interior is clean and orderly. There is no stove, no fireplace, no ash or soot visible on the surfaces. The lookout sits higher than most surrounding terrain, exposed to open sky. Wind should move freely here, yet drafts behave strangely. Cold air gathers in pockets, forming around shapes that cannot be seen. Standing still, visitors feel sudden chills pass by, brushing close before disappearing. These drafts do not follow doors or windows. They form in the center of the room, along corners, near railings. Others say it feels like standing near someone who radiates cold instead of heat. It is during these moments that the most unsettling reports occur. Some describe the sensation as being walked past by something invisible. Others say it feels like standing near someone who radiates cold instead of heat. The sensation is light and brief, similar to someone passing too close in a narrow space. It is not a grab or a push. It does not linger. It happens once, then sometimes again minutes later, always without warning. The touches never feel aggressive. They are gentle, almost hesitant, as if testing presence. Some visitors report feeling them along the forearm. Others along the back of the hand or shoulder. The sensation does not repeat endlessly. Cold Ash Lookout has no dramatic history on record. It was constructed for routine monitoring, staffed intermittently, often left unattended for long stretches. No major incidents are associated with the site. No documented accidents or disasters occurred here. Despite this, those who worked at the lookout for extended periods requested reassignment more frequently than expected. Logs mention discomfort, distraction, and difficulty concentrating. None cite specific events. The entries remain vague, almost reluctant to explain. Spending time inside the lookout amplifies small sensations. Sound carries oddly, sometimes dull, sometimes sharp. Footsteps echo differently depending on position. Silence feels heavier near the center of the structure, where the cold drafts most often appear. At dusk, the environment changes further. Light fades quickly on the ridge, and the smell of burnt wood seems stronger, more pronounced. The air cools rapidly. Drafts form more often, brushing past legs and arms with increasing frequency. The feeling of touch becomes more noticeable at this hour. It is never accompanied by fear, but it creates unease through its familiarity. Human contact is implied without presence. The mind struggles to reconcile the sensation with the empty space. The feeling of touch is implied. The mind is left to ponder the sensation. Some visitors report a sense of being guided, not led or pushed, but acknowledged. They do not direct movement. They do not repeat in patterns. They simply remind the visitor that they are not entirely alone. The smell of ash remains constant throughout the night. It does not intensify into smoke. It does not fade. It rests in the air like a memory that cannot dissipate. Breathing it in creates a quiet discomfort, an awareness of absence rather than danger. Morning brings partial relief. Sunlight warms the structure slightly. Drafts occur less frequently. The smell lingers but seems less sharp. Touches are rarely reported during daylight hours. Even so, the sense of something unseen remains. Cold Ash Lookout never feels fully empty, even when doors stand open and wind moves freely through the space. The air holds shape, as though molded by forms that cannot be perceived. Those who leave often speak softly afterward. The experience does not inspire fear so much as reflection. The gentle touches, the cold drafts, the persistent scent all suggest presence without intention. Memory without narrative. Looking back from the trail, the lookout appears unchanged. Wood, glass, and railings catch the light like any other structure. Nothing about it suggests what visitors feel inside. Cold Ash Lookout does not demand attention. It does not frighten or threaten. It exists quietly, carrying sensations that belong neither to the present nor to any clear past. The smell of burnt wood without fire. The cold shaped like movement. The light brush of fingers where no one stands. It remains a place where absence feels physical, where something intangible lingers just close enough to be felt, then slips away, leaving visitors to wonder what remains after heat and flame are gone. Raven Crest Lookout stands on a jagged rise where stone breaks through thin soil and the wind rarely rests. From the tower, the land falls away in long, uneven slopes, forests folding into shadowed valleys. The structure is simple and practical, built to endure weather and time, yet the space around it feels crowded in an unusual way. Ravens circle the lookout constantly. By day, they ride the air currents that rise along the ridge, their black shapes cutting slow arcs against the sky. They perch on railings and antennae, watching with still attention. Their calls echo across the rock, sharp and deliberate, carrying farther than expected. Rangers once joked that the birds treated the tower as their own. As seasons passed, the presence of the ravens became more noticeable. They gathered in larger numbers, arriving before dawn and lingering until dusk. No matter the weather, a few always remained nearby, perched and silent, heads tilted as if listening for something only they could hear. At night, the lookout changes. Darkness settles quickly on the ridge, and the forest below disappears into a single, shifting mass. Inside the tower, the air feels enclosed despite the wide windows. It is during these hours that visitors report the tapping. The sound begins softly, a light touch against the glass. Tap. Pause. Tap again. The tapping continues, moving from one window to another, sometimes circling the cabin as if following the shape of the room. The sound is gentle but persistent, enough to demand attention without becoming loud. It resembles a beak against glass, testing, curious. Some nights, the tapping grows more frequent. It aligns with movement inside the tower, pausing when someone stands still, resuming when they shift position. The effect is unsettling, not because of volume, but because of timing. Those who peer into the darkness beyond the windows often sense movement just out of view. A wing passes through moonlight. A shape crosses the edge of vision. The ravens never appear directly in front of the glass when watched closely. Local crews who service the lookout acknowledge the bird's unusual behavior. Ravens are intelligent and observant by nature, capable of recognizing individuals and patterns. Yet even experienced rangers admitted that the attention felt different here. Stories spread quietly among hikers and seasonal staff. Some claimed the ravens watched whoever was inside, tracking their movements through the windows. Others believed the birds took turns, maintaining a constant presence, day and night. Historical notes add weight to these observations. Raven Crest Lookout was once staffed by a small rotation of rangers who lived there for weeks at a time. Journals mention the birds often, noting how they gathered during long watches and remained nearby even when food sources were scarce. One entry describes a ranger feeling observed while eating alone at night, glancing up to find ravens lined along the roof, silhouettes against the stars. Another notes tapping on the glass during a storm, though no bird could be seen through rain and wind. Over time, the lookout was used less frequently. Technology replaced human watchfulness. And the tower became a shelter rather than a home. The ravens did not leave. Visitors who stay overnight report a strange awareness settling in after dark. The tapping resumes. The calls outside soften into low, throaty sounds. Inside, thoughts feel louder. Movements feel deliberate, as though every action is being registered. Some guests test the feeling by switching lights on and off. The tapping pauses when the interior goes dark, then resumes when light returns. Curtains drawn across windows do little to stop it. The sound continues, now muted but unmistakable. Scientific explanations offer partial answers. Ravens are drawn to reflective surfaces and may investigate glass. They are known to remember locations and routines. These facts explain behavior, but not the coordination, nor the sense of focus reported by those inside. Local folklore offers another view. Ravens have long been associated with watchfulness, with memory, with the space between presence and absence. According to these stories, places of vigilance attract them, and they remain where attention once mattered. On clear nights, when stars burn bright and the ridge lies exposed, the birds gather more closely. Shadows shift across the windows. The tapping becomes softer, slower, as if the birds are no longer testing, but waiting. Those who remain calm often notice something else. The feeling of being watched does not carry threat. It feels measured, neutral, even protective. The ravens do not act aggressively. They observe. Sleep comes in fragments. Dreams feel shallow and alert. By morning, the birds scatter briefly, then return as light fills the sky. The tapping stops. The tower feels ordinary again, though the memory of the night lingers. Visitors leave Raven Crest Lookout with mixed impressions. Some dismiss the experience as coincidence shaped by isolation. Others carry a quiet certainty that they were not alone in the way they expected. The ravens continue to circle the tower, black shapes against the sky, patient and enduring. At night, they return to the windows, tapping softly, marking the presence of whoever stands inside. Raven Crest Lookout remains a place of observation, as it was always meant to be. The difference now is simple. And the eyes in the dark belong to the birds that never leave. Lost Horizon Lookout stands on a broad ridge where the land opens suddenly and the forest stretches farther than the eye should be able to follow. The structure itself is simple and low, designed to frame the view rather than dominate it. A wide platform. Sturdy railings. Benches positioned to encourage visitors to stop and look outward. From here, the forest below appears endless, a rolling sea of green and shadow that fills the valley from edge to edge. At first glance, nothing feels unusual. Trees rise and fall with the terrain. Sunlight moves slowly across the canopy. Wind drifts through branches in long, even waves. The horizon sits far away, stable and calm. Then the longer you look, the less certain it becomes. Visitors often report that the forest seems to rearrange itself. Hills that appeared gentle moments before look steeper. Tree lines bend slightly, then straighten. Clearings seem to open and close as if breathing. It is subtle enough to doubt, but persistent enough to notice. Some assume it is fatigue. The climb to the lookout is longer than expected, and the air here feels thin and still. Eyes strain to measure distance across such a wide view. The mind searches for patterns and sometimes invents them. Yet the sensation continues even when people look away and back again. The forest does not shift dramatically. It does not transform. It simply refuses to stay exactly the same from one moment to the next. Visitors compare notes quietly, often relieved to hear someone else noticed it too. Time behaves strangely here as well. Many arrive intending to stay a few minutes. They sit, talk softly, take photographs, and watch the light change. When they finally check the time, they are startled to find an hour or more has passed. It does not feel like waiting. No boredom. No restlessness. The time slips by unnoticed, absorbed by the act of watching. Conversations drift without clear beginnings or endings. Thoughts stretch and dissolve, replaced by quiet observation. Phones and watches offer little help. Some devices show correct time but feel disconnected from experience. Others lag or jump forward unexpectedly. Visitors compare readings and find discrepancies of several minutes between devices that were synchronized earlier on the trail. Rangers are aware of these reports. They caution visitors to track time deliberately, especially those planning to hike back before dark. The path down passes through dense forest where light fades quickly. Losing track of time at the lookout can turn a simple visit into a hurried descent. The history of Lost Horizon Lookout offers few concrete explanations. It was built to give surveyors and fire watchers a clear view of the valley. Records describe the site as ideal for observation, with minimal obstruction and reliable sightlines. Early workers noted how easy it was to become absorbed by the view, but saw it as a benefit rather than a concern. Over time, patterns emerged. Search teams reported misjudging daylight after stopping at the lookout. Hikers returned later than planned without realizing how long they had stayed. No one vanished. No emergency marked the location. The effect was quiet and consistent. The forest itself plays a role. The canopy below is dense and layered, with subtle variations in color and texture. From above, depth becomes difficult to judge. Shadows move independently of branches, shaped by uneven terrain. Light reflects differently across slopes, creating the illusion of motion where none exists. Yet some visitors insist it goes beyond illusion. They describe moments when the forest seems closer than before, as if the valley has risen. Other times it appears impossibly distant, stretched thin beneath the sky. These shifts occur without warning and without lasting change, leaving only uncertainty behind. The horizon contributes to the effect. From the lookout, the line where forest meets sky is faint, softened by distance and atmosphere. On certain days, haze blurs the boundary entirely. The eye searches for a fixed point and finds none, drifting instead across repeating patterns of green. Minutes stretch or compress. Thoughts wander without urgency. The body remains still while awareness drifts outward, following the forester's slow rhythm. Some visitors report a mild sense of detachment. Not fear, but distance from immediate concerns. Plans feel less important. Time feels abundant, even when it is not. A few describe it as calming. Others find it unsettling once they realize how much time has slipped away. The effect ends quickly once visitors leave the platform. Descending the trail restores normal perception. Sounds return with direction. Time resumes its familiar pace, sometimes with surprising force. People often check their watches repeatedly afterward, grounding themselves in numbers. Those who linger too long at the lookout describe a reluctance to leave. Not resistance, but hesitation. As if stepping away from the view means abandoning a thought that was almost complete. The feeling fades once movement begins, but the memory remains. Lost Horizon Lookout has no warnings posted beyond standard safety advice. There are no barriers to limit viewing time. No signs explaining perception or psychology. The experience is left unframed, allowing visitors to interpret it themselves. Some return multiple times, curious to test whether it will happen again. It does. The forest shifts subtly. Time slips quietly. Hours pass in what feels like minutes, or minutes stretch into something wider and harder to define. It does not draw attention to itself. It simply provides a place where the horizon refuses to stay fixed, and where time loosens its hold just enough for visitors to notice what it feels like when the world moves without measuring itself. By the time they leave, the forest below settles back into its usual shape. The horizon looks ordinary again. And time, once more, feels heavy in the pocket, ticking forward as if it never wavered at all. Stormwatch Lookout rises from a rocky ridge where weather gathers with little warning. The tower stands taller than the surrounding trees, anchored into stone that bears the marks of countless strikes from wind and rain. During calm hours, the air feels thin and quiet, as though the land itself is resting. But calm rarely lasts here. A sky that looked open and distant can darken within minutes. Clouds roll in low and fast, wrapping the ridge in shifting gray. Wind sharpens, changing direction without warning. Those who have stayed at the lookout describe the transition as abrupt, almost deliberate, as if the weather chooses the tower as its center. Thunder follows quickly. The first crack often feels too close. It does not roll across the sky the way thunder usually does. Instead, it snaps sharply, echoing off the rock face and the metal framework of the tower. The sound vibrates through the floor, through the ladder, through the walls, blurring the line between outside and inside. Lightning flashes repeatedly, illuminating the ridge in stark white. For brief moments, the world becomes flat and overexposed, every detail visible at once. Then darkness returns, heavier than before. Those inside Stormwatch Lookout often feel as though the storm is not passing over them, but circling. Thunder echoes from impossible angles. A strike that should sound distant booms directly overhead. Another seems to come from below, reverberating through the rock. A strike that should sound distant booms directly overhead. Another seems to come from below, reverberating through the rock. Another seems to come from below, reverberating through the rock. The storm does not follow predictable paths. The storm does not follow predictable paths. It lingers, shifting, testing the space around the tower. It lingers, shifting, testing the space around the tower. Experienced rangers once assigned here learned to prepare quickly. Experienced rangers once assigned here learned to prepare quickly. Windows were secured. Equipment was grounded. Windows were secured. Equipment was grounded. They waited out storms with practiced calm, trusting the structure to hold. They waited out storms with practiced calm, trusting the structure to hold. What unsettled them were not the storms themselves, but the sounds that came with them. What unsettled them were not the storms themselves, but the sounds that came with them. During the heaviest lightning strikes, voices can be heard outside. During the heaviest lightning strikes, voices can be heard outside. They rise suddenly, carried on the same instant as the thunder, sharp and urgent. Shouts cut through the rain, clear enough to suggest words, yet distorted enough to be unrecognizable. The tone is unmistakable. Warnings. Those inside freeze, listening. The voices sound close, just beyond the walls, as though someone is standing at the base of the tower, shouting upward into the storm. The timing is precise. The voices never appear between strikes. They arrive only with lightning, vanishing as quickly as they come. At first, many assume the voices are echoes, thunder reshaped by the terrain. Sound behaves strangely in storms, especially in narrow ridges and open stone. This explanation satisfies until the pattern becomes clear. The voices do not repeat randomly. They respond. A particularly violent strike brings a louder shout. A pause in lightning brings silence. The voices never overlap with each other. They never carry beyond the immediate moment of impact. Those who have attempted to look outside during these moments see nothing. Rain lashes the ground. Wind blurs vision. Lightning reveals only empty rock and trees bending under pressure. No figures stand in the open. No lights move in the darkness. Yet the voices return with the next strike. Some describe hearing specific urgency in the sound, a command to move, to shelter, to brace. Others say the words feel personal, directed inward rather than outward, as if the warning is meant to be understood without language. Fear does not always accompany the experience. Many report a strange sense of reassurance, as though the voices are trying to help, to guide those inside through the storm. Storms at the lookout do not behave like ordinary weather systems. They arrive fast and dissipate just as quickly. Hours of violent thunder and lightning can give way suddenly to clear skies, leaving the ridge steaming and quiet. Afterward, the air feels scrubbed clean. The ground smells sharp and mineral. Damage is rarely found. No fallen trees near the tower. No scorch marks. The storms leave little evidence behind. Morning inspections reveal nothing unusual. Instruments remain functional. The structure stands intact. No footprints mark the soaked ground around the base of the tower. Those who experienced the voices often question themselves in daylight. Memory blurs the sound, making it harder to recall details. The certainty fades, replaced by doubt. But logbooks tell a consistent story. Across decades, different keepers noted the same phenomenon. Sudden storms. Thunder too close for comfort. Voices during lightning. Each account written cautiously, without embellishment, as if the writers feared being dismissed. One note mentions the feeling that the storm was being announced rather than endured. Some say the ridge amplifies sound from distant valleys, compressing it into something that feels immediate. Others believe the lookout sits at a convergence point, where air pressure and electrical charge gather more intensely. There are older stories as well, passed quietly among nearby communities. Tales of watchers who once stood on the ridge long before the tower was built, signaling storms with fire and sound to warn those below. The stories suggest that the ridge remembers its role, repeating the warning even when no one stands outside. No official action has ever been taken. Stormwatch Lookout remains operational, monitored and maintained. Visitors continue to stay, drawn by the drama of weather and the thrill of height. Most storms pass without incident. Some bring only wind and rain. But when lightning cracks close enough to shake the tower, and thunder explodes without distance, the voices sometimes return. Those who hear them often describe the same reaction. A sudden stillness. A sense of being addressed directly. An instinctive understanding that the warning is real, even if its source is not. As the storm moves on and the sky clears, Stormwatch Lookout stands alone once more, metal cooling, stone settling. The ridge grows quiet again, as though nothing unusual occurred. Yet those who remain long enough learn to listen carefully when clouds gather. Because when the next storm arrives without warning, and thunder echoes closer than it should, the voices may rise again with the lightning, reminding all who hear them that some places do more than observe the weather. Green Hollow Lookout stands at the edge of a broad depression where the forest folds inward on itself. The trees grow thick and tall, their branches interlacing overhead to form a living canopy that filters light even at midday. From a distance, the hollow appears vibrant, rich with green. Up close, something feels wrong. The forest is quiet. Not peaceful, not resting, but empty of sound. There is no hum of insects. No distant birdsong. No rustle of small animals in the undergrowth. The silence presses inward, sharp and immediate, as if sound itself has been excluded from the hollow. Footsteps feel too loud on the path. Breathing seems intrusive. Even clothing shifting draws attention. The lookout platform rises slightly above the surrounding trees, offering a view into the depths of the hollow. From there, the stillness becomes more pronounced, spreading outward in all directions. During daylight, the quiet is unsettling but manageable. Sunlight breaks through the canopy in narrow beams, illuminating moss and bark in rich detail. The forest looks healthy. Lush. Alive in appearance alone. The absence of sound never resolves. People wait for it to return, for the buzz of life to reassert itself. It does not. Rangers assigned to Green Hollow Lookout acknowledge the anomaly. They explain that certain environmental conditions can suppress wildlife activity. Changes in temperature. Shifts in humidity. Predatory patterns that temporarily alter behavior. These explanations are logical, but they do not explain why the silence is absolute, or why it never breaks. Light drains quickly from the hollow, swallowed by the dense canopy. Shadows deepen between the trees, merging into wide pools of darkness. The lookout remains visible, but the forest below loses definition. Depth becomes difficult to judge. Paths seem to end sooner than they should. Then the sun sets. The moment daylight disappears, fear arrives. It does not build gradually. It strikes all at once, intense and overwhelming. Visitors describe a sudden tightness in the chest. A rush of adrenaline with no clear cause. Thoughts scatter. Instinct urges immediate departure, even when no threat is visible. The fear feels physical, not imagined. Heart rates spike. Muscles tense. Vision sharpens toward the darkness below the platform. The body reacts as if danger is imminent, yet the forest remains perfectly still. No movement breaks the shadows. No sound confirms the alarm. Those who remain experience the same sensation regardless of background or expectation. Seasoned hikers. Rangers. Scientists. All report the same abrupt shift at sunset. The fear does not come from what is seen, but from what is absent. The lack of sound becomes oppressive, as though the forest is holding its breath. At night, Green Hollow Lookout feels isolated from the rest of the world. Stars are visible above, yet offer little comfort. The darkness below the canopy absorbs light completely. Flashlights illuminate only a few feet before fading into black. The silence grows heavier, layered, almost tangible. People speak in whispers without realizing it. Voices sound out of place here, as if they do not belong. As if they do not belong. Even the lookout itself seems diminished, its structure reduced to a fragile presence above something vast and unknown. The urge to leave intensifies with each passing minute. Some report the sensation of being watched. Not by eyes, but by awareness. A sense that attention is focused upward from the hollow. The feeling does not move. It does not approach. It simply exists, steady and patient. Turning in place does nothing to relieve it. Historical records offer limited insight. Early explorers noted sections of forest where animals avoided lingering. These areas were often associated with sudden weather shifts or unstable terrain. Green Hollow appears in a few such accounts, described as a place where sound fails and courage falters. No explanations were offered, only warnings to pass through quickly. Modern studies of the area have found nothing unusual. Soil samples are normal. Air quality is clean. No toxins or magnetic anomalies have been detected. Wildlife cameras placed around the perimeter capture normal activity, but within the hollow itself, footage remains empty. Animals approach the edge, then turn away. At night, those cameras record nothing but darkness. Visitors who attempt to stay past sunset often leave abruptly. Some describe an overwhelming need to reach open ground. Others feel disoriented, unable to focus on simple tasks. The fear does not escalate into panic, but it does not fade either. It remains constant, urging retreat. Those who ignore it report vivid physical responses. Cold despite warm air. Ringing in the ears. The sensation of pressure on the back of the neck. None of these effects persist once the individual leaves the hollow. The transition is immediate. Looking back from the path, Green Hollow appears unchanged. Trees stand still. The lookout remains visible above the canopy. Nothing moves. Nothing signals what was felt within. The fear fades quickly, replaced by confusion and doubt. Daylight brings partial relief. The silence remains, but the fear does not. Visitors return during the morning, testing their memories against reality. The hollow feels empty rather than threatening now. Still, few linger long. The quiet never becomes comfortable. Rangers note that Green Hollow Lookout is rarely visited twice by the same person. Those who do return often stand briefly, scanning the forest below, then leave without comment. The experience resists explanation. Words fail to capture the sudden certainty of danger felt at sunset. Green Hollow Lookout continues to stand watch over the silent forest. No insects return. No birds cross the canopy. The hollow remains untouched by sound. And each evening, as the sun slips away and shadows deepen, the forest tightens its grip. Visitors feel it instantly. A fear with no face. No movement. No sound. Only the certainty that something is very wrong here, and that the hollow prefers to be left alone. Last Light Lookout stands farther from human presence than any other structure of its kind. Reaching it requires hours of travel along fading trails, followed by a final ascent where the path breaks apart into stone and scrub. No signs point the way. The land offers little guidance, as if the place prefers to remain unseen. The lookout was built decades ago for long-range monitoring, positioned where sight stretched farther than sound. From its perch, entire valleys unfold beneath open sky. During its years of operation, it was staffed sparingly. Supplies arrived infrequently. Communication was limited. Eventually, advances in technology made the position unnecessary, and the lookout was closed without ceremony. Official records state it was abandoned cleanly. Equipment removed. Power disconnected. Doors secured. After that, it was meant to remain empty. Yet it did not. Travelers moving through the region sometimes notice it at dusk, a dark silhouette against the horizon. On rare occasions, light appears within the cabin. A steady glow shines through windows that should be empty and dark. It is not a flicker or reflection. It remains constant, warm in tone, unmistakably artificial. The lights appear long after sunset, when no one should be present. Those who see it from a distance often stop, unsure whether to continue. The sight triggers an immediate response, a tightening in the chest and a sudden reluctance to move forward. The urge to turn back rises without warning, strong and insistent, overriding curiosity. Some attempt to push past the feeling. They tell themselves it is fatigue, isolation, or imagination shaped by the remoteness of the land. With effort, they continue toward the structure, keeping the glowing windows in sight. As the distance closes, the urge intensifies. Steps feel heavier. The air grows still. Sound thins, as though the landscape itself is holding breath. The sense of warning does not arrive as fear. It feels protective, firm, and deeply personal. Those who ignore it report a growing sense of unease. Thoughts become fragmented. Focus narrows. The idea of reaching the lookout loses clarity, replaced by the overwhelming impression that proceeding is a mistake. The light in the cabin remains visible, unchanged, waiting. Most turn back before reaching the door. The moment they do, relief arrives almost instantly. The pressure lifts. Breathing steadies. Muscles loosen. The pressure lifts. Breathing steadies. Muscles loosen. Breathing steadies. Muscles loosen. Muscles loosen. Looking back, the light still shines, indifferent to the decision. It does not follow. It does not fade. It simply remains. A few who reach the lookout describe an even stranger experience. The closer they came, the stronger the resistance became, until standing before the door felt impossible. Some stopped only a few steps away, unable to raise a hand to the handle. Others retreated without conscious choice, finding themselves walking away before realizing they had turned. No one reports entering while the lights were on. Daytime visits tell a different story. In full light, the lookout appears abandoned as expected. Windows are dusty. Doors are locked. The interior is empty, stripped of furniture and equipment. No sign of power or recent use. Nothing explains the glow seen at night. The surrounding area reinforces the isolation. Wildlife avoids the immediate vicinity. Birds are rarely seen near the structure. Even insects seem sparse. Wind behaves oddly, sometimes falling silent around the lookout before resuming farther away. History offers few clues. During its operation, staff rotation was frequent. No one stayed long. Logs mention difficulty sleeping, vague discomfort, and a persistent sense of being watched from the surrounding darkness. These entries were never investigated. The site was considered remote, demanding, but otherwise unremarkable. After abandonment, occasional maintenance checks were planned but rarely completed. Crews assigned to the task often returned early, citing weather or access issues. Over time, the lookout was removed from active schedules entirely. The lights continued to be reported. Pilots flying at night sometimes notice a single illuminated point where none should exist. Hikers camping miles away speak of a glow on the ridge that vanishes by morning. The reports span years, separated by long gaps, yet strikingly consistent. The urge to turn back is not accompanied by threat or imagery. There are no voices calling out, no shapes moving behind glass. The warning comes from within, immediate and convincing, as though the body recognizes something the mind cannot articulate. Some describe it as a boundary, not meant to be crossed. Others feel it as a message of finality, a suggestion that whatever remains there does not wish to be approached. The light itself feels less like an invitation and more like a marker. At night, when clouds roll in and the moon disappears, the glow becomes more pronounced. It cuts through darkness with quiet persistence. It does not brighten or dim. It does not respond to weather. It simply exists. Those who turn back carry the memory with them. Even miles away, the sense of being watched fades slowly, replaced by lingering unease. Sleep comes reluctantly. Dreams often return to the image of the distant cabin, lit and waiting. Last light lookout remains where it has always stood, untouched by progress or decay. By day it is empty and silent. By night it announces itself in the only way it can. It does not call travelers forward. It turns them away. Whatever purpose the light serves, it appears content to remain distant, guiding people not toward it, but away. In a landscape defined by vast openness, last light lookout stands as a quiet refusal, a final point where curiosity yields to instinct, and the safest path is the one that leads back into darkness without answers. These towers were built to protect the land, but in doing so, they isolated the people who watched from them. Thank you for walking through the haunted forest fire lookouts of Oregon with me tonight. Left alone with the forest, the wind, and their own thoughts, many never truly left. The lookouts still stand, staring out over endless trees, holding memories that echo through the night. Some visitors leave with stories. Some leave with fear that follows them home. And some swear the forests themselves watch back, patient and unblinking. If you ever hike through Oregon's wilderness and see a lone tower rising above the trees, pause before climbing. Listen to the wind. It may be warning you. Would you dare spend a night alone in a haunted fire lookout, surrounded by miles of forest and nothing else here? Or would you descend before darkness claims the trees? Rest well, my friend. Until our next haunted journey.